Hi, this is Dr. Nazare. I'm going to be talking today a little bit more about narcissism. I realized that I put out a lot of ideas and thoughts about it the last time. So I wanted to kind of parse it out a little bit and give you a little bit more understanding and ideas about some of the things I talked about in the last video. So one of the things I wanted to expand a little bit on today is the idea of a persona. And if you remember, I was saying that narcissistic people who have a narcissistic personality or that have a lot of narcissistic traits, they really are wanting to present an image. And that image is what's called in psychology a persona. The image is not necessarily who they are. In fact, with narcissism, it isn't. It's an image that they want to be seen as. And that's the persona. So the persona has a particular aim, and that is to portray a kind of person that in actuality the narcissistic personality is not. So it's compensatory, meaning what the person feels they're not inside, privately, they need to aggrandize. And they make it grandiose. I mean, one of the characteristics is that it is grandiose, meaning it's big, right? It's extra big, extra large. So what they're trying to portray is that they are, the image is one where they have, as I told you the last time, these three principles: that they are wealthy, that they are beautiful, so good looking, having money, having power with money, and having fame. So that is how I want you to understand it. There's those three items that's what they're interested in, that's what they pursue. So when I say fame, I don't mean that they need to be famous, but they need to be as if they were famous. So that a lot of people like them, that a lot of people think well of them, and that people consider them important. That's what, it doesn't have to be that you're an artist and are doing, public shows. It doesn't have to be that. But they would love that if that were possible. So fame, meaning that you're important and that a lot of people like you and think well of you, is one of the prongs. The other one is that you look very good, so beauty. And that's why I was saying the last time that one of the things that people who are narcissistic focus on is their looks a lot. So it's very common for those people to be very much into exercise or into surgical procedures or whatever might be to make themselves look good, right? So that is the issue with beauty, that is the issue with fame, and the other one is wealth, so which has to do with power, because when you have a lot of money, it provides you power. So they're compensating for the person that they are inside, and what they feel is loveless, they feel empty, and they feel fraudulent, like a fraud. And why is that? Because they are portraying this image, but they know that that's not who they are. So they are aware that they're portraying this, but they know that that's not who they really are. They're fighting those feelings, in essence. They're fighting feeling empty. They're fighting feeling fraudulent, and they're fighting feeling unimportant and loveless. On another video, I'm going to talk to you more about how this comes to be, how a person comes to be a narcissistic personality or somebody with a lot of narcissistic traits. Because it's important to understand that this is developed in how we're related to in childhood. And that's why I want for people to hear this so that they can have more compassion versus that this is the person's fault. It really isn't their fault. It happened as a result of how they were treated. So two things that I wanted to expand on today, apart from recognizing those three variables of how they want to be looked at, is what are they avoiding? Well, they're avoiding being looked at as weak. I just heard myself say being looked at. Narcissistic personalities are really only focused on how they're seen. Their primary focus is how am I being seen by others? So they're not really looking at how they see themselves. They're looking at, their focus is how am I seen by others? It's very outside focused. The term narcissism comes from originally Freud using this mythology of Narcissus, who looked into the lake and fell in love with his image. And many people think that narcissists are people who are in love with themselves. In actuality, they're not in love with themselves, because in reality, they don't feel well about themselves at all. But this is why it creates this necessity to portray this false self, the persona, because in fact, they don't like themselves. They don't feel good about themselves. So they're constantly having to provide this other persona. And what they're fighting against is being seen. I want to really emphasize that. It's being seen by others as weak. So they're fighting being seen as weak. And what is weak? Well, the other day I was mentioning that any vulnerable feelings they avoid. Vulnerable feelings they look at as weak. And since they look at it as weak, they imagine that everybody else would look at it as weak. So they're trying to avoid being seen as weak. And they're trying to avoid the weakness in these two realms. So the one realm is that they make any mistake, because that's a weakness. If they can make a mistake, or if they have an impact, a negative impact on something or someone, some failure, that would be seen as weak. So they avoid anything that could mean that they have failed. And the other one that they're trying to avoid is needing people. So needing people is seen as weak, and making a mistake is seen as failure, and having any failure is seen as tremendous weakness. So that is why one of the characteristics is that it's very difficult for people who are narcissistic, and a typical narcissistic trait is to not take responsibility for mistakes. Why do they not take responsibility? Because taking responsibility admits mistake, and they cannot do that. And they cannot do that because they would fall into their real self, which is one of emptiness, lovelessness, and fraudulency, meaning that there is not much worth to you. So that's what they're protecting from. So they won't take responsibility, and they might even get defensive and point to you as the cause of whatever problem is being discussed. And what goes with that is that because they cannot admit making any mistake, they don't show remorse. So this is one of the big relational problems with somebody who's narcissistic, is that when they affect you and they impact you, they will not show remorse, which is what we need to see in another when we've been affected in a negative way. So they can show remorse. Why? Because showing remorse would admit that something was done wrong. And that is a forbidden area, because that would be seen as weak. The other area that they are very focused on avoiding is needing people. So this is an interesting characteristic. Taking responsibility and remorse are removed because it's so frightening to have had anything go wrong and that it would be your making. And the other one is the interesting characteristic of not being able to show gratitude. Why can they not show gratitude? Because if you show gratitude, like right now I'm in the middle of packing, and because I'm going to be moving, and it's a lot of work, so I'm very lucky that I have friends who come and help me. And when they come and help me, I show them a lot of gratitude. I tell them what a big difference that has made. And I show a lot of appreciation. If you're narcissistic, you can't do that. Because by the moment that I'm saying, thank you so much for coming to help me, it made a big difference, I am admitting that I need them. So these two aspects, taking responsibility, showing remorse, and showing gratitude, are missing in people who are narcissistic. So I wanted to show you these other aspects about it, and also to, at the same time, hopefully make you understand why it is that these things cannot be shown. Last time I was talking to you about the vulnerable feelings, and telling you that anything that shows vulnerability, sadness, feeling hurt, feeling confused, feeling anxious, these are feelings that narcissists will not talk about. They will avoid them because they think it's weak, and they are convinced that other people will see them as weak. And that is an absolute no-no. So I also mentioned the last time, and I want to mention again, that they are very sensitive to criticism. So they actually see criticism even when it's not there in reality. And they're so affected that they tend to use very violent language when they feel that they've been criticized, such as, you're stabbing me, you're dragging me over the coals, you're ripping me to pieces. This violent language, this person gave me a dig or a jab. If you listen to the language, it's actually quite violent. And of course, people are not literally doing that to them. But what's happening is that the hurt is so severe, not that they would ever admit it, that they feel almost like you're doing a physical violence to them. So that's the other thing that I want to kind of reiterate, is that they're very sensitive to criticism. And when somebody is told to them that you've been impacted negatively, they will defend and they may blame you, rather than look at themselves, because that's so scary. So those areas I wanted to kind of elaborate on today about narcissism. And so that's what I wanted to add for today, to highlight the lack of remorse and why that happens, and the lack of gratitude. Needless to say, missing these two ways of relating to other people has a huge price interpersonally. So they do have problems in interpersonal relationships, because they are not able to show these two major aspects that are very humane. And again, that is also what makes them unattractive relationally, because they can't do these things. But I explain to you more the next time, but I do want to emphasize that they weren't born this way. Their environment affected them in such a way where they became this. And one last thing that I'll elaborate more next time also, is that a very familiar feeling to people that are narcissistic is shame. They feel shame instead of guilt. And maybe on the next video I'll talk about the difference between the two. But shame, I'll say this to end for today, is the experience that other people are seeing you as bad. So both aspects of narcissism, the image they want to portray, is what they want to portray to the other people, see them that way. They want to be seen that way. So it's exterior. It's not coming from what I want to think of myself. It's what I want other people to think of me. And with shame, shame is the result of thinking that other people are seeing you in a negative way. And with shame, you want to hide and you want to flee. So if you connect that to the lack of responsibility, you can see why. If you feel shame, which means that you think other people are looking at you badly, then you want to run away, because you feel so awful and convinced that other people feel this about you. Now, I was talking about this with a patient this week, and she was telling me how she feels bad about herself. So I want to clarify that. A person who's feeling shame does feel bad, but the original clue to why they feel bad is because they are imagining that they're being seen as bad. And when they imagine that someone else is seeing them as bad, that's when the shame comes in, and then they feel horrible about themselves. And then they don't take responsibility and they don't talk about it, because the need is to flee and to hide. So I hope this helps clarify a little bit more about narcissism. And I will talk about it more in another video, as well as tell you a little bit more how this comes to be. And I hope that this was helpful. And please ask questions and make comments so that I may elaborate when you need that. And if you think it's helpful, go ahead and share with other people. Think about this for the people you know, to try and understand them better, but also think about this for yourself. And that's really my aim, is that maybe you come to understand your own psychology better, as well as understand other people's psychology better. Always trying to do this with some understanding of what is happening inside, and always trying to do it without criticism or judgment. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.